Hello and welcome to another episode of Parker's Previews powered by The Hammer. This is a show where we're going to use stats, data, advanced analytics to dive into some key matchups from the week to be better consumers of college football content and also to be smarter investors as we look at some of these bets, some of these matchups, some of these games. So this is episode 2 of 3 this week. Yesterday I talked about James Madison and App State. Today, going to talk about a G5, P5 matchup, TCU SMU in Dallas. Before I get to that, I want to make sure that you are liking, subscribing on YouTube. The Hammer CFB channel is doing some content that's pretty great. Make sure Parker's Previews on Twitter, you can find it there. At Stats of War is me on Twitter. I'll post games, post previews, post content all week long. And again, if you're auditorially inclined as opposed to visually inclined, or you want to hear this podcast, or you want to hear this video in podcast form, you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Parker's Previews on Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you get your podcast. If you have trouble with that, just DM Parker's Previews on Twitter and we'll help get you straightened out. So let's go ahead and talk about TCU and SMU, the battle for the iron skillet. So first things first, I will put out that I am a TCU alum. So I know that you're going to, I know there might be some conflict of interest there, but I assure you this is objective analysis, and I am a long-suffering TCU fan the last couple of years. And so certainly don't have any big faith in this team doing anything crazy, but I think this is a smart bet for a couple of reasons. So currently, I see this as TCU -2. There are a couple places where you can get this TCU plus anything. TCU plus anything is my absolute favorite bet. I think this started as a pick'em, went over to SMU, now has moved back to TCU, and currently is at 2.5 some places in favor of TCU. There are two books where I see TCU plus money. I would be rushing to grab that. I have been asked, a couple of people asked me about a money line for TCU here. I think you're going to pay a premium for points. So I really think that I wouldn't do that. I would stick to TCU minus 1.5, -2, -2.5. Anything short of a field goal, I feel good about TCU here and would bet it. That's going to be my official play for today. 92% of the bets are on TCU -2. 91% of the money is on TCU -2. The over-under now is at 70, I believe. Has been bet up quite a bit. 3-2 in the last 5 games, the over is hit. So 60% there. Coincidentally, SMU is 3-2 in spread bets the last 5 games against TCU. So definitely SMU wants to play a little bit more reckless, a little bit more high scoring game. I don't think that's the game that TCU historically has wanted to play, but this year might be interested in. 84% of the money is on the over at currently 70.5. I'm seeing a 69 as well and a 71. Who I would be inclined. I'd be inclined to hit that 69 as a total as well. 39% of the money on the over. A lot more people betting big on the under, but I like the over here, and I like TCU to win this game. So let's go ahead and dive into the specifics of the matchup. So SMU is 2-1, really good performance against North Texas. They did what they should against FCS Lamar. At Maryland, they had every shot to win that game. They had 9 scoring opportunities. They could not come away with points when they needed it. End up losing by a touchdown at Maryland. Did a pretty good job in terms of the basics, but Tanner Mordecai, especially in the fourth quarter, looked a little bit not himself. He completed only 53.7% of his passes, and for an average depth of target of only 9.4. SMU dropped 4 passes, and Mordecai threw 2 interceptions to 3 touchdowns. So not Tanner Mordecai's best game, and SMU still was within 1 score, had plenty of opportunities to win that game. TCU, on the other hand, goes to Colorado to start the season. Starts out really poor, close at halftime. They have their quarterback get injured, and they go to a running offense in the second half. They really just run over a really bad Colorado team. Against Tarleton State FCS team, they come out, and it's really the first time that the Dykes offense has been in full force. Obviously, it's an FCS offense or an FCS defense, and so you'd like to see them just absolutely blow them out of the water. TCU very much did that, took every opportunity as well. Quarterback Max Duggan in his fourth year as a starter, completing 78.1% of his passes, 13 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 12.1% big time throw percent, 10 average depth of targets, and only taken 2 sacks on 8 pressures. A really, really good overall performance by Max Duggan, really kind of filling in for Chandler Morris in that role. If I'm comparing these two teams and looking at what I think the edges are, let's talk a little bit about these these advanced stats and see where the numbers like this match up as well. Of course, before I get into that, you do know, if you're familiar with this, that Sonny Dykes is the coach at TCU. He moved from SMU last year, so there's going to be a sellout at SMU. There's a whole lot of fun college football off-field drama. We'll stick to the on-field drama here and talk about these numbers, but there's certainly plenty of storylines going in as well. I have TCU 61.5% win probability. Straight up, is expected to score about 37 points to SMU's 33. So that would be pretty pointsy. That would be a lot, not as crazy as last year's game, but still a pretty good scoring game. Very similar to that SMU Maryland game in terms of the offense that we'll see and the scoring opportunities. TCU in terms of EPA margin is 11th overall. SMU is 87th. Their offense has actually been a little bit worse than you would expect. 74th on offense compared to TCU's 30th in defense. And on defense, SMU 82nd, 0.075 EPA per play allowed on defense. TCU's offense is 16th, averaging over a quarter of a point per play. Net points per drive, TCU 4.62 on average once they, accounting for the probability of making a field goal, the expected value there, plus all your touchdowns. That's 5th in the nation. SMU's defense is allowing 2.12. That's 56th. On offense, SMU is 41st, 3.10 expected points per drive. And TCU's defense is 10th, allowing 0.74. Of course, this filters out for garbage time, so a couple junk drives against Colorado at the end of the game don't go into this either. Net field position, TCU has a strong advantage. They're at plus 13 yards of field position. SMU is that's 6th in the nation. SMU is only 4.28, which is 42nd in the nation. And in terms of style, TCU rushing a lot. Some of that is Chandler Morris got hurt in the second half, and so TCU did run the ball a lot, and they got a big lead. And then also SMU is passing a whole lot. That's 11th in rush rate over expected. Finally, kind of big picture number, TCU almost 70% in game control and that echo ratio. That's 8th in the nation. SMU is 39th with 57.6% as well. So kind of a story of a TCU team that's been untested but in control, and an SMU team who's played two bad opponents and an okay opponent and looked a little bit flighty here. So if we break down specifically why I think that TCU is going to cover in this game, you have TCU is 9th in EPA per pass so far. SMU's defense 85th in EPA per pass. TCU is 51% success rate on offense for passing. SMU is allowing a 44.2% passing success rate. That's pretty bad overall. And I think that their pass defense hasn't really isn't as sophisticated as they would like it to be. Last weekend against Maryland, they allowed 9.3 yards per pass, 17 for 23, only 214 total yards, but very effective 9.3 yards per pass. Maryland against this SMU defense. TCU's efficiency in terms of the run game is 67th, 0.02 EPA per rush, 33rd in rushing success rate at 46.3. SMU's EPA per rush is 83rd and their rushing success rate on defense is 76. They allowed 5.9 yards per carry to Maryland last week. A very bad performance overall in the run game. TCU is well positioned to exploit that with some experience along the offensive line, including SMU transfer Alana Lee, who's taken over at center. He and Steve Avila make up 2/3 of a really, really good interior offensive line. TCU is, again, really, really good at getting drives, getting quality possessions, 5th in quality possession rate. And they're only finishing them at the 33rd highest rate, 5.17 points per quality possession. But SMU is allowing some big play touchdowns. They're 44th in quality possession rate. So opponents are getting a quality possession 45.5% of the time on SMU, but they're averaging 4.4 points per quality possession. So that split leads me to believe that SMU isn't so much plagued by allowing these long, plodding, successful drives. They're actually plagued by these big play touchdowns, which have kind of gotten them. If you look at some of these drives, you have, a Maryland touchdown, big play, another big play, 48 yards for Maryland as well. And then another touchdown that came on a pretty big drive, a pretty big chunk play. So some of those chunk plays are what TCU's been really good at this year, and SMU has been poor at kind of defending. They're also allowing a lot of explosiveness and scoring and that finishing drive ability as well. In terms of early downs, TCU pretty split, 22nd and 19. SMU also equally split, pretty poor on early and late down. So I don't see a big split there in terms of how TCU is going to move the ball and how SMU is weak. But I do think that TCU's kind of run pass splits, their plotting efficiency in the run game is really going to raise the ceiling of that explosive pass game. I would expect TCU to be able to move the ball early and often and get it around. One other thing to note for TCU, Quentin Johnston, who's one of the better receivers in the nation, getting some national buzz. He really has not been super involved in this offense, which is not what you want out of offense. You'd like to get your best receiver the ball downfield. So Quentin Johnston, 9 targets, only 5 receptions. He's got an average depth of target of 7.2. Yards per route run is only 1.42. That's very low. Yards per route run is kind of like a production score. And so you'd want that to be around 3.5, a really good college receiver. Quentin Johnston has not been involved at all. TCU has really been spreading it out. I think they had 15 different pass catchers against Tarleton State last week. So they had the multiplicity, but if their rushing ability can kind of move their offense along, maybe they'll be able to get Quentin Johnston that ball downfield. That should present a really big threat to SMU. On the other side of the ball, SMU has not been as good through the pass game as they've been in the past. They're only successful on 39% of their passes. That's 83rd overall. And so they're almost 70th in EPA per pass, 0.012 EPA per pass. So not as good as they've been historically in the passing game for SMU against North Texas and against Maryland. Part of that comes from the finishing drives ability. Those are going to be big negative EPA plays when they're not finishing drives or those turnovers. You look at the receptions as well. Last season, they had three receivers with 70 targets, 4 receivers with 60 or more targets. This season, it's been the Rashee Rice show. He has 45 targets. The next closest receiver, Kelvontae Dixon, only has 14. Rice has been excellent, 17.5 yards per reception, 3 touchdowns, 5.1 yards after catch per reception, 12.4 ADOT, 4.75 yards per route run. I think that's leading the nation or close to it. So he's been really good, but it doesn't look like a clear second option has really manifested for SMU. And that would be a little bit worrying for me as I'm trying to figure out how they're going to move the ball. If you look at SMU last week, Rice had 11 targets, receptions. No one else had more than 4. If TCU can stop Rashee Rice, how is SMU going to be able to move the ball? One way you might suggest is the rushing game last year against TCU. SMU certainly was able to move the ball. I think they had about 350 yards. That is going to be, key this year is that TCU is taking a step forward in the run game. They're 35th in EPA per rush. They're 44th in rushing success rate allowed. And so I really think that TCU is going to be able to push SMU's run game back, stymie SMU's first option, and their offense, TCU's offense, is really going to push forward against the Mustangs to help force them to keep pace. So I like this bet, not just because I'm a TCU grad, but because I think that TCU's explosive offense is finally kind of coalescing. They've had the talent there for years. They've got some reinforcement on the offensive line. They look to be putting it together this year under Coach Sonny Dykes. SMU lost a lot from last season, hasn't really been able to develop a second weapon on offense, and their run game is a little bit worse than it has been last season. So I'm going to go with TCU as an official play to cover. I think you can get that anywhere from TCU minus 2.5. If you get TCU plus anything, you should bet that for sure, and should be a fun one. Awesome. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you check out my App State James Madison video from yesterday, and I'll have another video tomorrow here on Parker's Previews. Make sure you follow, like, subscribe the YouTube channel, Parker's Previews on Twitter, Stats of War on Twitter, and catch this wherever you get your podcasts. Catch you next time.